It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm just getting my panel together. Chi, could you go on the end? That'd be great. Yes, please, and sit. There you go. Bit of panel wrangling to start us off. Good morning, everybody, and really a pleasure to be here and to host the first of our panels today. Policy conference, as Anthony said, we've done over a number of years, but I think this is the first time AI has been the opening panel. Definitely the next session is going to be touching on AI as well, so it's really a key theme for today. And as we heard from Anthony, it's really a key theme on the political agenda right now, so that kind of makes sense, right? So we're talking about the UK's AI ambitions for 2030. What should be our priorities for AI technologies and how do we get there? And obviously that's a key conversation at the moment because as Anthony mentioned on the 30th of January, the Prime Minister launched the government's AI Opportunity Action Plan. A really ambitious and comprehensive new approach to artificial intelligence that aims to strengthen the UK's global competitiveness in AI development, but also focus on AI adoption, deployment, and deliver AI innovation-driven growth. It follows on Matt Clifford's AI Opportunity Action Plan, which makes 50 recommendations. I'm sure you all know all 50. Don't worry, there isn't a test. Covering a number of key areas, very much priorities for techUK members, actually, and I'm sure we'll come on to some of that in a little bit. So the plan offers significant commitments, and the government has broadly accepted those recommendations. So a clear statement to put AI at the heart of the UK's vision for not just economic growth, but also the future of public service delivery. So now what, I suppose, is the question. We have a vision, we have an ambition for 2030 for AI in the UK, and the technology sector is looking forward to helping support those ambitions. But how do we get there? How do we continue to seize the opportunities offered by this technology? What steps, what priorities do we really need to be focusing on? So that's what this session will consider. What more do we need to boost AI adoption, the practical steps, the priorities that we need to focus on. And I've got a brilliant panel to help us do that, all on a Monday morning. So we have Onwurah MP, Chair of the Science and Innovations Technology Select Committee, Sam Sharps, Executive Director of Policy for the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, and Justin Wilson, Senior Vice President and Head of UK Industries at Salesforce. Can we please welcome them all to the stage? Okay, so let's start with the government's AI action plan because it's definitely the focus of the day. And Sam, maybe I can start with you. Really ambitious goals, looking to 2030. So where do you think the first few actions we really need to be particularly focusing on? We're talking about priorities. Where do you see the priorities need to be?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me. Having been involved in a few reviews of this sort over the years, it's quite interesting sometimes to see the different varieties of independent review that the government commissions. Sometimes it's there to kind of put a difficult question to bed and take the heat out of something by having an eminent person review it for a bit. Other times they are genuinely looking for bright ideas and disruptive interventions. The kind of safe option for the independent reviewer is always to say, well, skills and infrastructure, everybody likes those. Let's have more of those, please. And then maybe a bit of R&D and a little bit of public policy to support it. And I was slightly concerned, I guess, that this was the direction in which we might end up going with the Clifford Review. But in fact, it's much more far-reaching than that, and it's quite ambitious. It does have a bit of skills and infrastructure in it because those things are necessary, and we do need to invest in those, and we do need to get that right. It's got some reasonably provocative language in it about developing national champions, which is a terminology that had sort of become incredibly unpopular and is drawing hisses from the front row, in fact. So it's quite provocative terminology. But it really does put together a programme of work that can make quite a lot of progress in the UK. There's something about getting the foundations right, obviously. We need the compute capacity, we need the data sets, we need the skills, we need the infrastructure to support it. There's something quite challenging on AI adoption. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit, but that has always been, tech adoption has always been a really difficult policy area. It's something everybody recognises is really important and we need to prioritise, but it's something that people have found very difficult to execute on. And then it has got this sense of, like, where is the UK's competitive advantage? Where are the moments or the points in the value stack where we can actually develop really cutting edge, really interesting businesses? And that's a great provocation. And there's been some early good signs, I think. Peter Carr's a fantastic champion for this work and is a great champion of the sector. And it's fantastic that he's got a mandate from the Prime Minister. The test is always going to be with these things, is there sufficient support and drive from the centre to make sure that everything stays on track, that everything gets delivered? And more specifically, is there the political will and courage sometimes to make the very deliberate decisions, which might be around regulation, it might be around competing policy ideas, it might be sectors for whom there are implications. Is there that will to drive the programme forward? And I think that's something I'm quite focused on, just trying to, I obviously don't speak for the government, but trying to monitor what the government's doing and hoping that we can drive through a lot of what the opportunities review gave us, because there's a massive prize at the end of this.
Yeah, indeed, and we might come on to some of that as well. But Chi, I'd love to come to you first. Obviously, you know, your role in the committee is to provide oversight. So what's your views of the action plan that, you know, obviously we have right now? Do you think it's ambitious enough, forward-looking enough? Do you think it will give us what we need to get to where we want to get to?
Well, that's a fantastic sort of way of putting the question, because I think to answer that, you need to decide where it is we're trying to get to, and also part of that is what it is, you know, what is AI for in a public policy or in a sense. And if you believe AI is about, you know, general intelligence replacing humans, you know, taking over the world, if you like, as some ambitions are, then obviously there's a different set of challenges and policy decisions, as compared to if you believe AI is about making the world work better for people and increasing all our productivity and ultimately prosperity. And part of the role of the Select Committee is to scrutinise government, you know, actions in putting the public interest at the forefront of that. I think that's particularly important for science, innovation and technology, because, you know, they can be, well, they are techie subjects and they may not have the same level of public attention as, say, the NHS or foreign policy right now. So I want to put the public interest right at the heart of this. And I think the AI action plan does a lot which is really important for that and really drives that. I think you talked about Sam talked about infrastructure. That is important in national compute. The innovations, AI innovation zones are fantastic. You know, I really welcomed that. I mean, as a Newcastle MP, I was slightly concerned that the first example of it does happen to be right slap bang in the Golden Triangle, but, you know, there's a call out for more, and that also will bring AI innovation, you know, to people's, you know, to places, to people, to close to, you know, to people, to make it more visible and more central. And I think that, you know, so that the AI groups, or I forget what they're called, but the AI with the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State chairing AI groups in the Cabinet Office will help with the political will, because that is really a challenge. I suppose what I'm concerned about, you know, is, and Sam's mentioned this, the regulatory environments that isn't clear. I mean, we know we have an AI bill. At least we were told we had an AI bill coming, and we knew it was supposed to be ready at the end of the year, but we haven't seen that. And, you know, not signing the Paris Declaration and not making clear that the change of the name from AI Safety Institute to AI Security Institute, you know, those can cause not confusion exactly, but the lack of clarity, which I think is really important for business and it's really important for people, because ultimately I think the challenges for AI are that, you know, almost for any technology, it's about adoption and it's about competition. Adoption, and I think just another point, that the digital centre of government and government embracing AI is really important, because where government leads, others, you know, will follow, and it also makes a clear signal that the UK wants to use AI to deliver for the public. But adoption in terms of people, you know, I think we're still not there with the clarity of use cases to solve people's problems. And that's one of the drivers of adoption. I think we need manufacturing and industry adoption to have a clearer path, and you mentioned that. And I think the competition, and obviously the Chinese progress in driving down costs of AI, but competition at sort of every level, at the model level, but also at the apps level. I'm not sure. I don't feel we've got a clear enough path on that. So, but short answer: welcome the plan. Still need more clarity.
Maybe more questions than answers right now, but
Yes.
and some of those we'll come on to as well, I think. But Justin, before we delve a bit more into the policy world and that aspect of this, as a global leader, technology leader, significant presence in the UK, what do you see, what do you welcome with the AI action plan, and what do you see as the role for industry if we're talking about how do we get this right, in actioning the action plan as well? So opportunities, what's industry's role?
Absolutely. So I think it's highly relevant that we're starting off with AI this morning, and I think the AI action plan also signals how important it is today here for industry and for businesses. I think we've, unfortunately in my role, I spend a lot of time with CEOs and their teams of FTSE 100, FTSE 250 companies. And in fact, I was with them, quite a number of executives last week, and they're absolutely bamboozled by this pace of change that's going on at the moment, right? So if you think about with AI, 10 years ago, we were talking a lot about predictive AI and how that's going to revolutionize things. Over the last couple of years, around generative AI burst onto the scenes with ChatGPT. And we're moving into a new era right now in the last 6 months around agentic AI, which is, to your point around, around use cases, actually AI taking actions on behalf of the consumer, the citizen, the business, and doing it autonomously. Now, the good news is, from our own surveys, we think that the UK is one of the most ready countries of the G7 to adopt these technologies. And we're putting substantial investment into the UK ourselves as a tech player to support our ambitions. So firstly, from an investment perspective, as part of our $4 billion investment that we announced last year, one of those was creating an AI centre, which is just down the road, not far from Waterloo on the South Bank, really where organisations can come in and learn about this new technology. Because we think it's really important to develop that skills pipeline as well. I think that's going to be super important, and I think industry plays a key role in that as well, to provide those learning opportunities to upskill people, not just to do coding. I think if you've heard in the press recently, people are hiring less software engineers at the moment. We're actually pausing or not hiring as many software engineers because actually AI is actually doing a lot of that coding work. It's actually how do you orchestrate, how do you think about the connectivity in and use this technology to innovate. And so we've launched free online resources like Trailhead, our online learning platform, to support that. And then I think the third thing that, as a tech player, we can all do, bar the regulation that's coming, because we talk about AI security, safety or security, and so on, is that we can take responsibility ourselves for ethical use of AI. And it's moving so quickly. And I'm having some very interesting conversations at the moment with our customers about who's responsible for what. It's a bit like autonomous cars, right? Who's responsible for if there's an accident? Well, actually, is it the large language model? Is it the technology? Is it the app? Is it the person that created it? Is it the data that fed into it? So I think regulation is super important, but it's moving so quickly at the moment. So we all need to be part of forming that perspective.
So do you share Chi's kind of view of, is that possibly what industry need more from policymakers and from government? It's that we talk about it in terms of clarity and certainty. Is it in those areas that you think we need to get more detail to allow industry to adopt and really drive forward at pace?
I think having some, whether it's a UK certification or something like that, where people can say that actually it fits in with this model, I think would help. I think at the moment every enterprise that I see has to go through their own regulatory approval, whoever their regulator is, particularly in regulated industry. So I think having some clarity around that would help organisations say, at least it's at this benchmark, we can move quicker. Having sandboxes effectively of people where people can try these things out without fear of repercussion, I think it's going to be super important as well. So I think, yeah, absolutely, there's definitely some things that we can do to ease and speed up the adoption of AI for companies.
Sam, I'd love to come to you on this, moving on to kind of the role of Parliament, the role of government, the role of policymakers in how do we reach our ambitions then, I suppose in the kind of how do we get this right? You've been the Tony Blair Institute's been quite vocal about the need for AI policy reform in the past. You talk about industry needing clarity and certainty. Where do you see most valuable, I suppose, intervention, given where we are right now, that government and policymakers could do to support? And I'm thinking widespread adoption of AI here, right? Not just getting the foundations right, but actual adoption.
Well, my general answer to the question would be, I guess, drawing on Tony's own time in government, his one big lesson is if the centre grips things well enough, then things happen. If the centre trusts every other part of government, not through malice or incompetence, but just because of competing priorities, the kind of impetus to change drifts away a little bit, and your control over the programme's much lessened. Now, the Prime Minister obviously has a massive agenda in all sorts of different directions at the moment, but some central grip of the overall programme looks really, really important. But one of the big challenges with this agenda is responsibility is diffused through quite a lot of different bodies. It's not just central government departments who have the spending power or the regulating power. It's independent regulators, and we've, as a country, have invested quite a lot in building up a number of independent regulators whose commitment to fulfilling their duties as opposed to taking political direction is a really important thing for investment in this country.
And world leading, right?
Very much so. And so Parliament obviously has a role in scrutinising some of the actions of these regulators, and there is a slightly difficult and delicate dance to do in terms of asking them to prioritise actions that will deliver a more vibrant AI ecosystem in this country without sacrificing the things that they're there to do.
Getting that balance right.
And that's a difficult one, and clearly there's some, let's say, steers or questions coming from the centre to try to get them to think that through, and that will take a little while. The other point, though, of course, is that when it comes to adoption, one of the big issues that this country's always had is that tech adoption will always happen among a certain number of companies, but there's a long tail of mostly smaller businesses, an awful lot of whom are outside the London and the South East, where government's ability to reach or influence how things look on the ground is somewhat limited. My own view, having run around this course quite a few times, is that actually it's the industry that really knows how to sell stuff. Government shouldn't put it in the place of trying to convince SMEs that they need to adopt tech and do things differently. It's just not what government's for. But what it can do is ensure the infrastructure is there to support it, provide whatever nudges or tax incentives or whatever you want to design are there to make sure that adoption can take place. And if necessary, reinforce the ability to outreach to businesses or to provide some kind of assurance to them that they're not about to take a huge step into the dark. And that's a really difficult and challenging agenda, and I think there's a lot more to think through there still.
Yeah, and the AI champions that you mentioned as well, they're in there, could be a really useful, powerful tool for doing that. And of course the AI growth zones as well. So there is a kind of, you can look at the action plan and see how it could all fit together, but as you say, it's just then putting it into action and realising it. And with Matt Clifford being number 10, do you think that's also an important, you talk about leadership and steer, is that really important development as well?
Absolutely. So Matt's a great champion for this sector. He's very dynamic and forceful and charismatic and agreeable guy, and he's been a great choice. He needs to be given the tools to succeed, and he needs to know that he's got the political support on his side. Otherwise, I'm sure there are lots of other things that he could spend his time doing.
Yeah, I might come back to you on the safety security point, because I know you raised this as well. But just before we get that, just wanted to Parliament's role here? You know, we talk about government's role, we talk about industry's role. What do you see as Parliament's role, or perhaps the pressing need for parliamentary scrutiny as this plan develops? Because obviously it's not we're not going to do this in 6 months, right? This is we're looking 2030, you know, vision. So particularly when we talk about AI development, but also adoption, how do we ensure that we get the right governance while maintaining that competitiveness? So it's getting that balance. What's the role in What's the role of Parliament in that balance?
I think Parliament and parliamentarians do have a particularly important role here because, once again, I mean, AI is something, as we define it, AI is something which is already touching the lives of almost all my constituents and the constituents of every parliamentarian, every member of Parliament. And so we need to be authoritative, positive, but also well-informed champions of this transition or the use of this technology. And so that's partially through the scrutiny that not only my select committee, but the Defence Select Committee is looking at AI in defence. The Health Select Committee will be looking at AI in the health service. You know, every public accounts office is looking at value for money through AI in government. So this is something which touches every aspect of our democracy, if you like, and every aspect of our society and economy. So it's really important, and it's also an area where, you know, to be frank, there was a lot of lobbying from very vocal private sector and also civil society organisations. So it is really important that members of Parliament are well informed, and that we have, as my committee, for example, we've launched an inquiry into the public, the digital centre of government, and part of that is the way in which AI is going to be used to transform public services. Now, the public sector does not always have a fantastic record in the adoption of IT for big projects. Yeah, some people laughing because that's a diplomatic understatement. We're going to transform the whole of government with AI. There are huge benefits to be gained. And Peter Kyle, who is a fantastic champion for this technology, talks about every individual being able to save, I think, about a week of time if they don't have to keep on re-inputting their data everywhere, if public services are tailored to you, together with all the other benefits. But in order to achieve that, you know, we need the machinery of government and the skills within government and the scrutiny of some of the detail of how that is going to be put in place. Because, you know, as Anthony said in his opening remarks, this is about technology, but it's also about people. And in that particular instance, you know, we've heard over the weekend the Cabinet Secretary talking about letting go those civil servants who don't meet the grade. You know, implementing AI transformation is a huge challenge. And that, you know, so I think that there's the aspect of the scrutiny of plans ahead of time, so that we don't make mistakes we've made in the past. But I think that then there's also I don't know whether you want to come to this in more detail, but there's public trust. I mean, we're representing the people, you know, and if the people see, if our constituents see that we trust AI, you know, that may help, and we also need to, that should help, but we also need to reflect the concerns that people have about technology. And I think far too often, I worked as an engineer for 20 years before coming into Parliament, and spent the last 6 years working for Ofcom as the head of technology regulation. But people feel far too much that technology is something that is done to them, you know, and not for them and with them. And if with that mindset, you cannot embrace technological change. You have to feel part of that. And so I think the Parliament also has a big role in helping and ensuring and putting in place the regulation or the requirements that people feel part of this, agents in this process of technological transformation.
We'll touch on that. We have time. I want to leave some time for questions. Yes. There's so many different avenues that you could go with this discussion. I was just thinking, Justin, as Chi was talking about ensuring Parliament is informed. It's not just business leaders we need to help educate and keep informed as these technologies develop. It's also the government and policymakers and parliamentarians. Do you think your centres of excellence can be, a tool to help with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the reasons why we set up the AI Centre, to bring in all different constituencies, from public sector to non-profits to enterprises, to learn more about AI. I think it was really interesting to hear what she was saying about how the government's thinking about its own adoption of AI, and I think we talk about it ourselves as a company. We're adopting AI internally and being what we call customer zero, right? Because
Yes,
because actually, it's how do you inform people? It's actually by doing it yourself and learning and taking people through that change process. So, as a technology company, of course, we've got a large support website, help.salesforce.com, and you go on the website and people hopefully find the information that they need. But typically we saw 2 million of those requests, of the many million that we have, actually being escalated to a human person to intervene and so on. So we've implemented agentic AI, which actually goes and takes the actions for you. And we've seen that drop by 83%. Now, initially when we launched it, we didn't have that success rate, but we learned through, in a very quick six-week period. And then, of course, that changed the jobs for our support engineers. And what they're doing and what we're tasking them to do now and how their roles are going to evolve. And I think that's going to be the same in government departments. It's like how do you, what is the new jobs to be done? Where can we, where are the gaps that we can fill because we're automating? And I think the other key thing really, for us is like we're talking about with our customers is, are we the last generation of executives that are only going to manage human workers? Or actually, are you going to be managing digital workers and human workers combined, right, alongside each other? And who are the type of organisations, and I think they will probably come in the UK, where people will set up new companies where they've got a digital workforce with a radically lower cost base that will then go and disrupt other industries as well. And I think we've got the environment here potentially to do that. So there's opportunities and risks with that as we think about this new workforce that we're going to need. But,
Conversations we need to keep going with. So I just wanted to touch on things like public trust and skills before we close. But Sam, I just wanted to touch on this because it's come up a couple of times, because obviously we're talking about the UK here, the UK's ambition. But as Antti mentioned in his opening, it's a global conversation right now, and we need to look at the global context. And one of the biggest, as she raised herself, one of the biggest questions following the AI summit that happened in Paris was around the shift from, or the perceived shift from AI safety to AI security, at least with policymakers here in the UK with the name changes, as she mentioned. So we're back to balance, right? How do we, how can we ensure we get the balance around being cautious around security and resilience of AI? Because obviously that's fundamentally important, systems and users, particularly if we're talking about adoption, whilst we're really ambitious about the opportunity the technology presents us. And that's, again, a balance that policymakers have to get right as well, because both are equally important. But if we're going to realise our ambitions, how do we get that, or how do policymakers get that conversation right? And are they getting it right?
Yeah, I totally agree. So the US Vice President came to Europe and made a series of remarks, not all of which were to my taste or everybody's taste here, I expect. But one of the things he lighted on, which is a genuine concern of mine, is that the previous summit had been the AI safety summit, just at the point where a lot of the energy could have been going into opportunities and ambition and action, which I think is something that the French organisers took on board. Now, I understand this in many ways was, there were geopolitical considerations behind how the previous government framed the Leicester Summit, and that's fine, but it did send quite an important message. Now, there is a kind of happy win-win circumstance in which we give people assurance in the safety and security of the technology they're using. That gives industry confidence in which to invest and develop and drive trust and drive take-up and all the rest of it. And in many ways, we shouldn't shy away from the idea of safety. We want a safe food environment. We want safe food regulation. That's not anti-food. That's pro-food. That's very, very pro-food. That's something everybody likes and the food industry welcomes. So there is an agenda to pursue here, but I think putting it front and centre before you've even talked about the development of a very nascent market is possibly a little bit cautious and falling too far down on the other side. The real test, though, beyond all the branding, is how does this actually get applied in principle? Now, you can change the name of your institute, fine, that sends another little signal. But the very specific thing about AC, I think, is that it needs to be built around frontier risks, like really emerging high-level concerning risks, as opposed to every single element of something that might go wrong with AI. Not least because, as we've already talked about, there are a set of sectoral regulators who are already tasked with a lot of this stuff. Now, each of those regulators needs to be upskilled. They need to have the people in place who can understand the technology and make decent assessments, and that in itself is quite a big program. But if we step into an AI policy agenda with the assumption that the only way you can provide assurance around this is to have a big, powerful, new regulatory oversight structure, then we're possibly getting off on the wrong foot, in my opinion.
Interesting. Thank you, Sam, for addressing that point. I'm going to come on to some questions from the audience, so stick your hand up if you have a question for our panel. But just while I scout the audience, Chi, I wanted to ask you a question on skills, because Justin mentioned it as well, about how we make sure that organisations have the right skills and there's right skilled people. And I know this is a key focus for you over the years, the skills pipeline. How do we get AI-specific skills into that pipeline? Highly technical AI skills, which industry will need. How do we make sure that challenge, sorry, that's a panel all in itself, isn't it? That's a horrible question, but what do you see, back to priorities, where should we be focusing on in terms of priorities? And then I'm going to scout the audience for questions, so I'll leave you with that to answer.
I think there were three sort of bundles of priorities here. I think general digital literacy and technical skills, high level, are really important here. And the fact that under the last government we didn't have a digital literacy plan, or we didn't have a digital literacy, even a target, and that this government is producing one, is a really important transition, because all my constituents need to feel comfortable with AI and technology, and that's not the change. So general, then on the specifics, so that we have the Skills Council, which the Skills England, which the government has set up, and the Industrial Strategy Council, and I think they need to and are working together to identify some of the skills sort of changes, because I thought what Sam said about you said about managing digital workers. We don't know what those skills are really yet. Some of the people need to be able to use AI in their works, but we don't know what skills that involves. And then on the sort of the third bucket is the deep technical skills, and there we have a whole program of support for STEM skills, and particularly in terms of access to STEM skills from those from underrepresented backgrounds, such as women, people of colour, etc. The fact that most of the AI models have been developed by a small demographic is a concern, and the way in which those models are implemented and the way in which the technology is implemented needs to be the skills need to be representative of our entire nation, or indeed globally. And so that's another huge. So there's three big buckets that the government has got actions on. Yeah,
where if it's not diverse, is it ethical? It's a good question. Okay, I've got two questions. I'm going to take them both at the same time, if that's okay for the panel, just because we're running out of time. Is there a microphone, or do I need to run and play Oprah? I'm quite happy to run and play Oprah. Okay, I think, Audrey, are you coming down? So there's a lady here in the front row, and then actually opposite to the lady with the, So if we could take two at once, that would be great. Just introduce yourself and who you are, where you come from.
Yes, I'm Zoe Crowther from Politics Home. And Chi, I wanted to ask, in your committee inquiry, obviously the challenges of adoption of tech is going to be a huge issue for government, but also the safe delivery of that tech. And given past scandals and issues like the Horizon sub-postmaster scandal, how much emphasis is your committee going to be putting on kind of looking at the risks of major errors and bias in kind of AI systems in government? And you mentioned public trust as well. How do you think government can go around strengthening that public trust in tech, given those huge past errors that have affected hundreds of people?
Okay, thanks, Zoe. Let's get the other question, and then we'll take two at a time. Yep, just Yes, thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Lucy Fraser. I was Secretary of State for DCMS in the Sunak administration. So I had a question, Chi, for you and Sam for you, because you both talked about the importance of clarity of policy and also the fact that policies are good and coherent when they're driven by number 10. And I was interested to know what you thought number 10 should be asking for in the talked about AI policy trade deal with the US.
Two great questions. Who'd like to kick off?
Please.
So Zoe's question about emphasis on risks and issues of error and bias, and then government strengths, and then obviously Lucy's question.
Great. Well, your question could be my entire inquiry in a way, because there are, as I said, there are many examples, and we have looked at it. The National Audit Office has a report on sort of the a report on sort of the biggest scandals, whether that be from misuse, as in the failure of use is in Horizon, or just in terms of money lost to the public sector. And the way in which we're going to try and address this is to look at 3 or 4 particular cases, examples of how it has worked or not worked in the past. And for example, one, we're deciding which ones to look at the moment, but for example, if you took universal credit, there's a lot to be learned from how that, because that was across government, it needed to be implemented. But there's also as a constituency MP, I saw so many issues in the rollout of universal credit. We should also look at the ways in which where it's been successful. I mean, and I think the digitalization of the driving license has been incredibly successful, and we've had very few, well, I'm not aware of complaints with regard to that. So we will be looking to highlight the key learnings, both on a sort of government organizational part, and also in terms of the skill set that is needed to make intelligent decisions about procurement. We'll also be looking, and this is an issue, in terms of competition for supply. So, for example, right now, I think the government has only 2 suppliers of web services, and whether or not there's competition in the market and the access to for small businesses, etc. So there are a lot of issues in there, but our objective is to deliver a report which the government can learn from as it is implementing this transformation. And also just the involvement, and I've already raised this with Peter Kyle, the involvement of civil service trade unions, because as a technologist myself, you cannot implement technology unless the people who are implementing it are with it. It's amazing how creative people can be in getting around technology if they don't agree with what it's trying to do. So that's it's going to be. It's a lot of work that we're going to be putting into this. On your second part about public trust, I do think the government, and the government is, part of that is making it clear that government is on the side of people. And the reason why the other inquiry that we're doing into misinformation, social media, and the riots over last summer, it was really important that the tech companies came into the select committee. We had TikTok, we had Meta, we had Google, we had X in the end. We had X, not Elon Musk, but he did have X. It's really important that they came and were answerable, and it's really, it's critical, I think, that people see that tech is answerable to the people, and that's also the case for AI. So the government, and Peter Kyle is great at sort of championing technology for public good. And we need to see in the particular use cases, and this is why I come back to use cases, because people don't know what AI is being used for often in their own lives. So if AI is being used in recruitment, for example, it's not transparent often. If AI is being used in the NHS to review your radiograph, your examination, that is often transparent, and that's something that's very positive. So we need transparent examples of where AI is making life better for people. And the DCIT is really making a huge effort to champion those examples. And I think that is important in supporting public trust. I do think we need a regulatory framework which is also clear and transparent, and that has had less progress made on it.
Apologies, Chief.
Sorry,
But those case studies, obviously, industry very, very supportive
if
to help with
you
that
have
as well.
suggestions for case studies,
Yes,
let me know.
suggestions, or you have case studies, let me know. Sam, can I ask you to maybe touch on Lucy's question just before we close on the number 10 and what it should be looking for in terms of trade deal?
Oh, yeah.
Was it
Trade
Lucy,
deals
was that?
with the US.
With US discussions.
I didn't even catch that little bit. Okay, thank you. Life is complicated and difficult, it turns out, post the US election, and all sorts of previously taken for granted policy objectives are suddenly trade issues. So I think the US administration has already talked about things like the Digital Services Act in the EU and the Online Safety Act in the UK as being contrary to their political or their industry interest, and therefore things that could provoke them to retaliate. And so stepping through all that seems incredibly difficult at the moment, quite frankly. I can't see a circumstance, just speaking personally, in which you could surrender an entire domestic policy agenda on the basis that it all becomes trade issues. But at the same time, there's a reality of dealing with the US administration. There's also a reality of dealing with a lot of the stakeholders, some of whom are in the room today, who are US domiciled businesses and have a massive role to play in the development of our AI market and adoption and progress. And so I genuinely don't know how this is going to play out. It all seems very volatile at the moment and very difficult to schedule. Maybe Peter Mandelson in Washington, D.C. has an amazing plan. If anybody does, I reckon it's probably him.
Or something we might have to come back to in the weeks and months to come, surely. But Zoe, Lucy, thank you for both of your questions. And with that, I'm afraid we have run out of time. But can we please thank, look, this is a huge topic, but I think the panel's done it great justice. So to Chi, to Sam, and to Justin, please thank them in the normal way for a wonderful discussion.
Well, thank you, Sue and panel, for a fantastic opening session. When you're running a conference, you always want the first panel to set a high bar for the day, and I think you've absolutely done that. Now, we are determined to keep you well caffeinated throughout the day, so we're going to have a short coffee break before we come back here. Now, I think we'll come back here for 10:35. We're probably overrunning by about 5 minutes or so. But if you could make your way to the main room to grab a quick coffee and then come back here, and then we'll come back for a session on AI and work, and then we'll be hearing from Sarah Cardell from the CMA. So thank you, everybody, and thank you, panel. Thank you.